Hello and welcome to Talking Football. My name is Justin Pennick and we are continuing and marching on with our 5 best and 1 worst series. Today we are doing the running back position.
Petey Jones, running back. The running back, y'all.
And the way that we come up with our 5 best and 1 worst rankings of each position is we are going to have 10 different metrics, 9 of them statistical, 1 of them is my silly, stupid eyes, and then the way that we come up with our rankings from those metrics, those 10 different metrics, is that we have a point system. You finish in first place in a given category, you get 10 points. Second place, 8 points. Third place, 7 points. Fourth place, 6 points. Fifth place, 5 points. All right, let's kick it off. So, what we are doing in the metrics and the categories, the measurements that we're going to be evaluating running back play and who's the best running backs in the National Football League is by the following metrics. Rushing yards per game, DVOA, defense value over average. It's Football Outsiders metric. So basically, you look who's number 1 in DVOA. J.K. Dobbins, 26.1%. That is basically saying that J.K. Dobbins is 26.1% better than the average replacement running back in the NFL. PFF grade, rushes of 10 plus yards, rushing yards over expected, an NFL Next Gen stat that is measured outside of offensive line effectiveness. And then coming up next is broken tackles, yards after contact, another individual kind of effort, individual running back measurement that I like, yards after contact, receiving yards, got to include the receiving game, and then also my eyes with Dalvin Cook as the number 1 back, ALVIN, KAMARA, DERRICK, Henry, Christian McCaffrey, and Nick Chubb. Before I get to my final list and before we get to our top 5, I did not use a veto in the last episode of this series. I'm going to give myself 1 veto per episode, whether I want to make that veto for the worst player or whether I want to include a player that I want to include in the top 5. So because there were some key injuries last year, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, those are 2 running backs that basically they didn't put up enough statistical stats to be on this top 5 list by just using the point system. So I may use a veto for either one of those players. So I'm going to use a veto this episode. I didn't have to use it for the quarterbacks last episode. So that's important to know. So for our final list of who are the 5 best running backs in the National Football League, according to our metric and our own ranking system that we have going on here on Talking Football, I have at number 5, ALVIN KAMARA, 25 points out of a possible 100 points. I love ALVIN KAMARA. I put him on my eyes list. I put him as number 2 because he's such a fun guy to watch. If anything, the way that the Saints have used ALVIN KAMARA as the years have kind of gone on, especially in 2018, ALVIN KAMARA's average depth of target in the receiving game in 2018 was 1.8 yards. That is absurd. That is insane. Usually you have running backs, their average depth of target being, less than 1 yard or, them being a check down option. No, but KAMARA was used in the receiving game. He's always been used in the receiving game. A lot of these running backs that are on this list, they're kind of reliant on their volume to be effective, but I would say KAMARA may be the exception out of all these guys where he almost doesn't even need a lot of rushing touches to be effective because he's getting those targets in the receiving game and he can be effective no matter when he kind of touches the ball too. So I have ALVIN KAMARA as number 2 on my eyes, but in this final list, he is coming in at number 5, the number 5 best running back in the National Football League. Coming in at number 4, we have Nick Chubb from the Cleveland Browns. Nick Chubb is in a very, very fun offense right now, and arguably he's part of one of the more fun teams in the National Football League in the Cleveland Browns when you just look at complete roster. Kevin Stefanski, I think his offensive system and I think his offensive play calling is the best in the National Football League right now. Shanahan and McVay, there's been a few years of tape being put on their end, and Stefanski, I feel, is almost just getting started in terms of what he can do with that Cleveland offense as Baker kind of grows into it. And then also Nick Chubb is growing into it too. In 12 games last year, the fact that he averaged 5 yards per carry and the fact that he got over 1,000 yards, including in a competitive backfield that is with Kareem Hunt, it's extremely impressive. Obviously, the offensive line is really good, but the system is really good too. And the fact that Nick Chubb was still top 5 in the National Football League in rushing yards over expected, that's not a rate. I didn't use rushing yards over expected per attempt. I used total rushing yards over expected. And the fact that he was top 5 in the National Football League, and that when he did play 12 games, right up there with Derrick Henry, it's extremely impressive. And with this Stefanski system, like, yes, it gives you open running lanes. It's an outside zone scheme. You also do need to have the vision. And Chubb has the vision, but he also can break tackles. He's also up there in broken tackles. And in terms of most explosive rushing offenses, which I love looking at explosive plays, in terms of most explosive rushing offense, Nick Chubb and the Cleveland Browns, they were the most explosive rushing offense last year. And as I look to my screen on my right, on my handy-dandy computer, I see that he was 4th in rushes of 10-plus yards, which absolutely does not surprise me at all. And again, it's kind of crazy that he played 12 games. Every single year that Nick Chubb has been a running back in the NFL, this includes a bananas 2019 where he received so much volume, he has averaged over 5 yards per carry. He's 3 years into his NFL career. He's averaged 5.2 yards per carry. That is insane. He is coming in at number 4. And number 3, here is where the veto comes in. I am using my veto. I am putting Christian McCaffrey in as the 3rd best running back in the National Football League heading into the 2021 season. He could be number 1, but you have to have the injuries kind of play into effect here for C-Mac. He was one of 3 running backs in the National Football League in 2019 to get over 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 receiving yards in the same season at 23 years old. I mean, I'm 23 years old right now, and I'm talking in front of a green screen. Christian McCaffrey was running out there getting 1,000 yards, 1,000 yards receiving and 1,000 yards rushing in the same year. Marshall Faulk also did that in 1999, and Roger Craig for the San Francisco 49ers did that in 1985 as well. So C-Mac, the acceleration, the burst, and the ability to handle the volume while also being efficient. The ability to handle all that volume, and even in 2019 played like 93% of the snaps. That is so rare in today's NFL for a guy that can handle that kind of volume. You don't see these workhorses, and all 5 of these guys on this list, they are true workhorses, and that's what separates them as running backs compared to the rest of the field and the rest of the league, really, where yes, they get the volume, and that's why they have such big stats, but not everybody can get that volume. You don't trust everybody getting that same volume, and C-Mac is even more than Derrick Henry, in my opinion, because of his work in the receiving game. He is the true workhorse in the NFL, and if anything, in a league of his own. He's in a league of his own in terms of how much of a workhorse he is, because the NFL, as just in the history of the game, is hand the ball off, hand the ball off, hand the ball off to a quote-unquote workhorse running back. C-Mac isn't just a guy that you can hand the ball off to. He also can get over 100 catches on the year. I mean, his 2019 was 116 receptions, 142 targets, 8.66 yards per reception, which for a running back, that is not bad at all. He was targeted less than 1 yard. His average after target was around, a little less than 1 yard, but he got over 8.5 yards after the catch per reception, and that is what makes him not just a check down Charlie in the receiving game. It makes him actually a lethal weapon in the receiving game as well, where you don't mind giving him, in a way, 100 catches, which is kind of crazy to say. So Christian McCaffrey, hopefully this guy comes back stronger than ever this year, comes back from that injury, and there's a reason why he's number 3. So a little note, just a little housekeeping note based off of the veto. Number 5, if I did not have Christian McCaffrey as a veto, number 5 would have been a tie between Aaron Jones and David Montgomery. There were a lot of names on this list compared to the quarterback position in the last episode. So there's a lot of different ways that we use to evaluate running backs, including receiving yards. And the top PFF grade even included a guy like Damian Harris, who I think is going to have a really good 2020. Check that out for you fantasy folks out there. Damian Harris may have a good year for New England, especially I think they're going to be a little bit better now that Mac Jones is more of like that conventional quarterback. But anyway, a lot of names are featured on this on this rankings and on this point system because a lot of running backs can do a lot of different things for a lot of different teams. It's not so structured as quarterback. So 5 was a tie between Aaron Jones and David Montgomery. David Montgomery had a really good second half of last year, so I do want to give a shout out to David Montgomery. You saw how many times his name was kind of popping up throughout when we were doing those point ranking systems. I was actually doing this exercise on the Google Doc that I do it, and I was like, is David Montgomery going to make this top 5 list? Is he going to be the veto? He certainly was pretty close to it with Aaron Jones. But C-Mac was the veto that I put in at 3. Nick Chubb at 4, Alvin Kamara at 5, and then going on to number 2, we have Dalvin Cook, 64 points out of a possible 100 points. I love Dalvin Cook. I have Dalvin Cook in my eyes. Dalvin Cook is number 1 in the National Football League because I think he is the perfect combination of catching the ball out of the backfield, speed, power, burst. I think he is the most complete back in the National Football League, and that isn't a dig to anybody else. I think Cook is just that good. And the fact that he was in Gary Kubiak's system last year, and he was still good. I mean, he gets a lot of volume, but he's still good. I'm sure a lot of people were worried once Kevin Stefanski moved on from the Minnesota Vikings. Well, how is that offense going to operate? And certainly Kirk Cousins, had a rough start to the year with turnovers, and he settled in kind of nicely. And Kirk Cousins is a whole other conversation on him at quarterback. But Dalvin Cook, if there was one thing that was constant, that stayed constant between Kevin Stefanski's offense and Gary Kubiak's offense, it was Dalvin Cook and him being a baller. And just, you cannot get better than the combo of power, speed, burst, catching the ball ability from Dalvin Cook. And I think he's the most complete back in the National Football League. That's why he's number one in my eyes, but he's number two. And a guy that absolutely dominated. So we have two positions in a row. Aaron Rodgers took 81 points out of a possible 100, and Derrick Henry got really, really close. Derrick Henry, 77 points out of a possible 100. And this is a guy that doesn't really catch the ball. But he is a thumper. If you like old school football, and I know there's a lot of old school fans out there, that follow us at Talking Giants, and they like Bobby's film breakdowns. And if you are an old school fan, or even a younger fan, screw it. If you're a younger fan who likes watching the offensive line and running the ball, then Derrick Henry is your guy. The ability for this guy to break tackles, create something out of nothing. He's got a pretty good offensive system too, and we can have the debate back and forth of when did that offense actually start to be more efficient, when Ryan Tannehill came along, or did Derrick Henry naturally just progress anyway? But Derrick Henry is, I think, unquestionably and undoubtedly the best runner in the National Football League right now, and the fact that he is this good, the fact that you can give him all that volume, and Tennessee's offense can still be that efficient without him being kind of a threat out of the backfield to catch the ball, I think is absolutely phenomenal. It's amazing. It's kind of jaw-dropping seeing the plays that he can make where he's the strongest dude on the field. He's tossing dudes. He's a walking highlight reel. And if you like old school football, Derrick Henry is kind of like your guy. So that's the final list. So let's review. Alvin Kamara, number 5. Nick Chubb, number 4. Christian McCaffrey with our veto coming in at number 3. Dalvin Cook, number 2. Derrick Henry, number 1, coming in the number 1 spot. And the worst running back in the National Football League, this was tough because I didn't want to call some of these guys that I saw that they were extremely non-efficient, but I'm just going to give it to Todd Gurley. I know Todd Gurley's not on an NFL team right now, but you watch. Some sucker team, and I hope it's not my favorite team.
If this was a Catholic school dance, that dude would be thrown out.
Some sucker team is going to sign Todd Gurley this year when one of their running backs goes down. Todd Gurley is so bad. Like, bottom of the barrel in efficiency ranking by NFL Next Gen Stats. Total cumulative negative yards when it comes to rushing yards over expected, and that's the cumulative one, not the rushing yards over expected per attempt. Really, really bad. So I'm going to give it to Todd Gurley, even though he's not on an NFL team right now. Guarantee you he will be this year. He's just really bad, and he was kind of in the league longer than he should have been. There you go. That's the worst. Enjoy your day. Thanks for watching Talking Football. Stay tuned. Think we're going to do wide receivers. See you then.